Hey guys, the following is a conversation I had with Lane Walter. Lane works with the Colorado Bowhunters Association, and he is tilted a little bit towards the resident. But in this discussion, we talk about how the new draw structure in Colorado that's coming in 2028 applies to both residents and non-residents. We talk about who are the winners, who are the losers. For sure, if you have a bunch of points and you're a couple years away from drawing a coveted deer tag, elk tag, antelope tag, you're getting screwed in these changes. But we go beyond that. We talk about a bunch of the other things that might change. The reality is these seem like small changes when you look at each individual one, and then you look at how non-resident archery tags in Colorado are going all to draw. They all seem minimal, but when you add them up, it's going to affect draw strategy in a big way, really starting today, because people are going to anticipate these changes in 2028. So we dive through all of these, talk about how you can take advantage of them, how you can deal with them. So without further ado, let's dive right into it. Guys, biltong, okay? I have been obsessed with this stuff for 3 or 4 years. Ever since I got on a keto, carnivore, paleo-esque type of diet, I've had a hard time finding healthy snacks. Biltong is a great option, particularly the slabs that have this fat on the side. That's where your energy is if you're a fat burner like me. Super simple ingredients in this, guys. Literally 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 ingredients. Compare that to your gas station jerky. A great snack in the backcountry or just day to day. Biltong Depot is a huge supporter of my content. Go to their website, biltongdepot.com. Use my discount code CLIFFG, CLIFFG for 15% off at checkout and to support this content. Thanks, guys. All right, Lane. Awesome to have you, man. I'll be honest with you, dude. I didn't even know that this draw structure changes were being debated because I'm not in Colorado. I haven't been keeping up on it. So when I saw your post on it, I was like, oh, this is very interesting. And I started to do some of my own due diligence on it to see the changes. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to get Lane on and walk through all of them with him because he's actually spent the time to be there or listen to these calls and really knows what potentially or is certain to change in terms of Colorado's draw. So let's just start there, dude. What are the big ones?
While I'm pulling this up, we'll just talk about really quick about how these changes came apart or about. And during a commission meeting a couple years ago, um, Commissioner Tushton had gotten a lot of emails saying, hey, the draw, we want this change in the draw. We want this change in the draw. We want this change. And he was like, I'm not, he used to hunt. He doesn't actively hunt anymore. He's like, I'm not sure what's going on. Let's just put together a working group. And they did that. They put together last November, I want to say, was the first meeting of the big game draw working group. And it consisted of, like, they did a really good job of putting it together. It consisted of 8 members of the public, 1 non-resident, I believe. And then they had 5 different meetings from October 2023 to May of 2024, putting together all these just recommendations of what they want to see happen. And so there's a lot of time and effort in this group. Like, starting out, I'm not going to lie, I wasn't optimistic at all. There's members of Park and Wildlife in there, just like pushing the conversation a little bit, and there was a couple commissioners in there that were able to have their 2 cents, so that when it came to the commission, they were like, hey, we were on this isn't just some random people. And they came out with some really good stuff. I don't want to discredit what came out of this at all, because I think some of this stuff is actually really, really good. They put a lot of time and effort and thought into it. And some of the changes, like when I saw the final proposals, I was like, all right, there's some really good stuff in there. There's stuff I didn't like. Like, one of the things that they had, it seemed like they were tasked with getting rid of points, or at least they took it as that. I don't think they actually were tasked, but they took it to the extreme of trying to get people to burn points. Yeah. And so one of their proposals was that your first, second, third, and fourth choices in the draw, we're going to use your preference points if you drew.
Yeah.
Which would have been very successful in getting people to burn points, but it also would have just put a ton of work on the secondary draw and a ton of work on the staff. And so that didn't go through. The commission looked at it and said, hey, and they heard a lot of feedback about it. And they were like, yeah, you know what? Let's not do that part. So the one thing that I didn't really like didn't go through anyway. The changes that are coming out of this, and I'm just going to go down, and they're going to change the draw for elk, deer, bear, pronghorn, turkey, is all going to be, instead, it used to be 100% of the tags went to the high point holders. And so, and with the 75-25 split, 75% of the residents their tags would go to the high point holders, and then the 25 non-resident tags, those would go to the high point holders. That's now going to be a 50-50, where 50% of the tags still go to the high point holders, but then 50% of the tags are going to be put into a pool that they're calling a hybrid bonus draw.
Right.
And that just means that if you have 0 points and you put in for a unit, your name goes in the hat once. If you have 20 points, your name goes in the hat 21 times. So you get a point for the year you're applying for.
Right.
So it's still going to favor the high point holder, but it's going to give everybody a chance, kind of the way that Utah does it. Arizona does it the same way. Wyoming still has that, although I think theirs is a 20% allocation. I think it's an 80-20,
Yeah.
if I'm not right off the top of my head. But you still have a chance. Everybody has a chance at drawing. And so that's what this is doing. It's going to encourage people to apply for some of these units of like, hey, I'll never draw 201 archery elk. But now I have a chance. But we kind of already had that, and I think that's what was kind of missed on some of these members. Nothing against them, that was already there. If a unit took more than 5 points, there already was that there. There
Right.
was already the hey, there's a chance. But they
Yeah,
just took it
there
to
were
extreme.
yeah, so there was already an existing hybrid draw for those very high point units. Now, Lane, if I recall, and I could be wrong on this, was that only for residents or was that
I I can't give you the honest answer off the top of my head.
okay.
I thought it applied to both,
Yeah, and I don't
but I
and
couldn't I couldn't tell you really
yeah,
off the top of my head. And it was like just a random thing. It wasn't so much of the way it is now with the weighted. I don't hate this system.
yeah.
Every system is going to have its ups and downs. They could have done so much worse with this.
Mhm.
They could have really screwed stuff up. Some of the stuff they talked with. So I don't hate the way that this is playing out. Do I
Right.
love it? Yeah. Do I
Yeah,
hate it?
well,
Yeah.
I guess
Like it's
for
not a bad thing.
right. I well, so let's put this in context for the listener or viewer lane, because I don't think everybody's going to understand like the fundamental problem that was coming down the pipeline. So all the other states have moved to this for this or moved to some variation of this for the same reason that Colorado is facing, right? And tell me if I'm wrong, but essentially when you looked at the math, you had all this accumulation of points that one of the challenges that Colorado was going to have is that people look at these things logically to some extent, and it was starting to not make sense for anybody to get into the preference point game, right? Because they were
Absolutely.
so far behind. They there's no incentive for a new hunter or even some guy who just wanted to start, getting into this whole system. He didn't have a lot of incentive based on probabilities. It would have been basically dumb to start. So that's like the fundamental problem. One thing that I don't know, and this I think I'm always very wary of creating some misinformation on my end. Part of me is like, okay, they want people into the system because they're making a bunch of money off of annual applications. Is there any element of that? I mean, is that a truth?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, so
They're
that's a
making.
revenue.
So it used to be in 2018. No, they would lose money in the draw, and I have printed out a bunch of the fiscal year stuff because we'll get into this later on. Because there's one thing out of this meeting that kind of made me mad, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But in 2018, I believe they said it cost them over $5 million to run the draw,
So
because
they were net negative 5 million bucks.
they were losing, yeah, just on
Okay.
running the draw. It was costing them 5 million because they would have to, instead of just doing like a credit card return like Wyoming does, they were mailing out checks.
Right.
And the manpower of going through and doing that, mailing out the checks, doing all that stuff, dealing with fees from the bank, it was costing them $5 million to run the draw. So
Right.
then when they changed it in 2019, 2020, I thought it was 2019. Then they started requiring you to buy a qualifying license. So there's where the revenue comes in right there. And they started, instead of having to do a refund, it was just an $8 fee to apply, and that covers the fee. So then they're not losing money paying the company to run it. And so then, yes, now they started making money from 2019 forward. The more people apply, the more money they make. And that's very evident in the first year that they changed it. I want to say it was in 2018, hunting and fishing license revenue was $81 million. In 2019, it was $96 million.
Yeah. due to those
And
points.
and that doesn't count them not losing the $5 million in expenses that they were burning on there.
Right.
There's still some expenses to run it, but we were paying for it now with our application fees,
Yeah.
whereas
So
before we weren't.
right. So
So they
basically,
had a huge swing right there.
yeah. So
So yeah,
running
there is an incentive for them.
Yeah, so and I think that's becoming the case across most states, Lane, that the running the lotto, right? These are dude, one of my concerns about the whole thing, I don't even know if it's a concern. It's just like I'm starting to use a framework around how these states do this, and it's becoming a state-run lottery in the sense of that they're making money off of it too. So it's very analogous to like state-run like lotto tickets. The big game draw is
Yep.
actually like it's become a very similar economic model, which I think, and maybe we can get into that. There's some maybe perverse economic incentives there that might not be the best, but it's just we still have to realize that okay, this gets to your point of like maybe this was a decent alternative because if you have the state, they have the incentive to have more people in the draw and the probabilities are all screwed up for new people, they're going to for sure fix it, right? From their perspective. So they got to get people who have accumulated points. They either got to take away opportunity from them in a sense, or they have to motivate them to use those points up like right now. So
Yes.
it sounds like to me the choice they made is actually primarily just to take a little they basically took a little bit of equity away from the people with a lot of points and they put it into that slight random element of the bonus side of the draw. Is that basically what they did?
I think that's a fair analysis of looking
Yeah,
at it and getting back into it. I'm okay with us making money for Parks and Wildlife
sure.
because that gives us the biggest seat at the table. As soon as we're
Yeah,
not giving them the most money, we lose our seat at the table as hunters. And right now, Parks and Wildlife has an incentive to recruit hunters. And they
yeah,
actively try. They have the Hug a Hunter program that worked really well. Like there's all kinds of stuff they're doing that these anti-hunting groups hate, and they're saying, why are you spending money on this? Why are you doing this? Well, because we actually contribute money. So I
right.
don't hate the fact that we're making money for Parks and Wildlife. I want to see that money utilized correctly, but and I think that there's some rabbit holes we can get into of where it's going that is like, yeah, why is hunting dollars going to that instead of parks dollars? But it is what it is.
Yeah,
So as far as having a seat at the table, I'm totally okay with it being an economic model, and it is like the lottery.
yeah, sure,
And that's what
true.
it's turned into. But as far as getting into the very next change, they changed the so it used to be in Colorado a couple years ago. It was a 65% of the tags went to non-res or went to residents, and 35% went to non-residents. If it took more than 6 points to draw a unit, that went into an 80-20 pool. 80% residents, 20% non-residents. We got that changed last year to 75-25, which was great for residents, and it didn't really hurt non-residents because we still give away way more tags to non-residents than any other state. Um,
Accounting for the that a lot of those are like over the counter tax. Is that right?
the 75-25 doesn't even go into the non-resident tags. I'm talking about just the draw. If you look at what Colorado gives to non-residents in the draw, not counting OTC tags versus Wyoming and Montana and New Mexico, our
It's still like
allocation
above
is
average.
much larger.
Yeah,
Much so,
sure.
like New
I got you.
Mexico, it's 10%.
Yep.
Colorado, it's 25. So
Yep.
we're still giving, and we have a lot more elk here, so we're already giving away more elk tags. So it's
Sure.
I think it was a fair split. But what they did is they took away that 80-20 draw for the hybrid. So you're talking about, hey, we just did this 50-50 thing where we kind of took some from the high point holders. Well, now we also just took away 5% more from the high point holders. So if
Okay.
anybody's losing out on this, it's those high point holders, in my opinion,
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
that have been the most dedicated here. And I think if anyone's going to be mad, it's probably going to be them on this new
Mhm.
system. At the same time, it's kind of helping some of the high point holders too, because if I have 20 points and I'm putting in for 201 that takes 28, my odds of drawing just went way up. I'm not waiting 8 more years. I could draw next year. But
Yeah,
2028,
sure.
I don't think I've said it. These changes don't go into effect until 2028. That's
Right.
when, so they're going to do 2 years of education on this and trying to let people know, hey, these changes are coming. These changes are coming, so that it's not a slap in the face for people when they go to apply.
Yeah.
Um,
So
and
so One sorry, Lane, I don't mean
Yeah.
this. I just because I keep getting these questions that pop in my head. I want to answer them because I know me and you will go off on a bunch. So it 100% these changes are happening. Is
Yes,
that
it was
true?
voted on.
Okay.
So the way that this was supposed to happen, um, they had a meeting in November, and they were supposed to be voting on a lot of this stuff in November, and then roll into the January for the final vote. And
Okay.
then that kind of like it was the November meeting was messy. I want to say because people weren't understanding stuff, so it got pushed to here, and they were talking about maybe voting on it in March, and then they just all came together and rallied at the end, and they voted on it.
Yeah, and so it's a
Good, bad,
done. Okay.
indifferent. It's a done deal. These changes,
Yeah.
as of right now, are happening. On the backside, getting into it, there's some stuff there. We're talking about 2028. It's only the beginning of 2025. There's going to be 3 years for us to make some changes.
Yeah,
Some
like
stuff is
things
some
could
stuff
get.
is going to get tweaked and it's going to get worked out.
Yeah, like it would basically it would get reverted through like a vote on a change back is
Yes,
yeah. Okay,
if
I
it
got it.
does change, it has to
Yeah.
be changed through the commission. Staff isn't allowed to say, "I don't like this part. We're going to change it."
Yeah.
Right? And there's little stuff in there too, like the preference point fee. I'm assuming they're not going to charge youth. That wasn't addressed. That's going to have to be addressed at some point. And I'm assuming they're going to run it the same way they do the sheep, moose, and um, mountain goat right now, where youth aren't charged for points. That's my hope. But
Yeah.
it's not. That wasn't addressed in any of this right now either. So there's stuff that's going to be worked out.
Yeah, just clarity and administrative stuff that needs to be changed. I get it. But from the perspective of a hunter who has points or doesn't have points or whatever, but's interested in this whole game, that like, yeah, it's gonna start 2028, but it already started because everybody's gonna game around this change, right? And
Yep.
for sure, I mean, it's not even speculation, like just math wise, the guys that for sure got screwed were the guys that were a couple points away from drawing a specific unit that they were planning on hunting, right? They for sure are like the losers in this, and it doesn't really. I'm not saying that makes the plan negative. Obviously, there's going to be winners and losers, but they got hosed. Now you bring up a really good point. When you jump down a little bit, somewhere in the middle of things, those guys maybe got screwed a little bit because it's going to take them a little bit longer to just draw on the preference point side, but they picked up a random chance, right?
A much better random chance.
Right.
Yeah.
And then the folks that are just getting into the game, they're net positive because now at least they have some chance. So that's kind of like the rough breakdown of winners and losers on this thing. Um, I one question I have, Lane, because dude, it's hard. I hate to say it, man. Like it's hard for me to palate the top side guys getting hosed for the reason that you said. Is they're the guys who committed to the system. Like some of them got 25 deer points, they got 30 deer points, and now all of a sudden, like there's more variability to their potential chance, and like it's just unfair, man. You know what I
It,
mean?
so one of the words that was used in this, and I'm going to make some people mad by saying this because it's Colorado, but they were tasked with making it fair and equitable for anybody. And when
Yeah.
I hear that I'm making something fair and equitable for everybody, that means I'm screwing the hardworking people that have put the most time and effort into it so that somebody that just comes in can have the same chance.
Right. Dude, it's a hard one because I it's analogous, dude. I can kind of relate to some of these guys. I don't have the situation in Colorado, so personally I don't have it. But dude, I was getting where I kept looking at my probability of drawing a sheep tag in Wyoming. I had like 23 points or something, and I'd periodically look at it and I'd be like, "Oh yeah, dude." And I kind of like had units I wanted to hunt. There's like some places that were there were horseback hunts where I know some outfitters there, so there I could work out a pretty good deal to do a hunt with them and be in wilderness areas. Like this is gonna be badass. And then when they changed the allocation on resident non-resident, I like looked at the math and literally that one change, Lane. I looked at it because I'm like such a dork. I spreadsheeted out. I'm like, no, I've been doing this for 23 years and it no longer makes sense for me to get points. Like I literally,
$150 a point per year.
yeah, dude.
Like,
Like, yeah, and like compounding and interest and, inflation adjusted is probably like 10 G's, right? Like just gone. And
just
then
go
it's
buy
just,
raffle tags.
yeah, yeah. And so it's gone. So I can relate because it's like, oh, dude, like I kind of bought into the system. And yeah, it's a little bit different because I bought into that I bought into the idea that the resident non-resident split was permanent. Nobody told me it was permanent. So I don't have like really anything to bitch about, but I did like buy into the status quo was the deal. And I think it's the same deal. A lot of people in Colorado are going to be like, well, this is bullshit, dude. Like I bought into a deal's a deal type of thing. Guys, no excuses. All the stuff that I talk about on the podcast, all the stuff I talk about on YouTube, you can do it and you can do it with me. There's a bunch of hunting, fishing, spearfishing experiences on my website. Go to pursuitwithcliff.com. Right on the top on the menu, click experiences. It'll walk you through all the different options. These are trips oriented around making you better. It's about the skill set and it's about improving as an outdoorsman. So if that's you, that's what you want, go check them out and join me on the next one.
Yep. Yep,
But,
I think so. And like you said, there's going to be winners and losers and everything. The way this breaks down, the worst. Parks and Wildlife is going to win because more people are going to apply. Like when
yeah,
I help a lot of people with their applications for other states because I'm one of those nerds that like I can
sure.
tell you your draw odds in New Mexico and Arizona.
Right.
I always tell people Arizona is a great one because you get to the random. New Mexico is great because there's no points, so everybody has a chance. Like when you break it down, you look at it. Colorado was always the one that's like the nice thing about it was that you put the time in, you're guaranteed at some point,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that's still
Well,
there, but there's a lot more time now.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Now there's still that element, but you've got the random part of it. And the other thing, this is I was naive to, is that you kind of should have known it was coming down the pipeline in Colorado. Like I kind of would think about it every once. I'm like, oh, they're gonna have to do something. They're gonna have to do something because there's like so much, it's like there's so much top heavy on the point. So you knew it was coming. One thing that if you're putting for states in for draws that are random, you can't really get screwed in the long term. It's just well, I hope I draw. You know what I
Yep.
mean? Like
Yep.
you can't get yourself into this situation where it changes down the way. And you made a really good point, Lane, is I I don't recall a single situation where long-term strategies in terms of building up points. I mean, obviously you can draw some great hunts doing that and people have historically, but I've never seen a fishing game level change that benefited those people.
That's good.
You know
Yeah.
what I mean? And or like a draw structure change that benefited those people, kind of to your point. So, yeah, it's an interesting deal. If you don't mind commenting, if you do know, Lane, were there other alternatives considered to deal with
Oh,
this?
there was all kinds of stuff. There was talk about going into the full random. It was thrown out to get rid of points completely, but then you'd have to figure out how to compensate the point
Yeah,
holders. There was talks of just stopping of building points, but the problem with just if we stopped points this year, they and the same number of people like were applying and burning their points at the same rate per year, it'd take over 30 years to get rid of the points that we have in
yeah,
the system right now.
like
So
it's crazy.
that was easily thrown out right now as well. So there was they did look at a bunch of other stuff. One of the people that was on the working group that like was very familiar with the way that other states do it. I want to say it was Austin Atkinson's from Hunt and Fool.
Hmm.
And so I've heard a lot of people complain that they had this like quote unquote tag pimp on there making things the best for non-residents, but at the same time he brought a ton of knowledge to this table and telling people like, hey, this is works good in Arizona, this is what works good in Utah, this is what works good in New
Right.
Mexico. He had that knowledge base, so he was the subject matter expert when it came to it because that's what he does for a living. So he was a very good pick overall, I think, to just be able to show, hey, so everything was considered. Montana's, Wyoming's,
Sure.
all the western states. Like there was a consideration given there.
Yeah, well, dude, and those guys are valuable, man, because I get asked a lot of questions about other states, and I know some of them I've hunted, and some of them other ones I've outfitted in some of the other states, but I'm pretty Colorado centric, and it's like it's hard to keep all this shit straight, man. In your
Oh,
head, like what makes sense and what doesn't make sense, yeah. So it's nice to have a guy like that that has it, has the knowledge base. Um, dude, are you familiar with the concept of point banking?
yeah.
Was
I
that was
don't
that
know why Parks and Wildlife Commission hates point banking,
Yeah.
but they absolutely, hands down, were told hell no. Point
Why?
banking and point averaging were off the table.
Yeah, you mean like group averaging?
Yep.
Dude,
Yep.
that it's so weird to me, Lane. I would love to hear the logic. I'm actually very bummed to hear that from you because I was hoping that you had like the inside scoop of why. Because, well, first, so everybody knows what point banking is point banking is basically where your bid, like, so if I have 20 preference points, I don't necessarily have to put them all on the line. Like, I could bid 10. Is that correct? How it works? How it would work, Lane? So I could bid 10 for this hunt, right? So then I could actually have a strategy where instead of going on one, crazy quote good hunt, I could say, hey, I just want to hunt a good unit 4 times over the next 4 years, right? And that's how I'm going to use my points. So I'm going to, go do a 4 or 5 point unit over the next 4 years instead of doing a 20 point unit. So I think it's awesome. And honestly, like as a hunter, I think it's great too because you get to learn the unit and there's all these like, it's an interesting way to do it. And then I actually think the group thing is great for families and buddies that could share points. And I think I personally think that for the really high point holders, that would have been a much more equitable solution. Um, it's unfor I would it's too bad, dude.
So the reason why in 2006, I believe, and I might be off by a couple years, but I'm pretty sure it was 2006, Colorado tried point banking.
Mhm.
And in the commission's words and looking back, it was an utter disaster because people would apply, like people with 20 points applied for a unit that took five, but then they weren't the only one. So they didn't burn 5 points. They ended up burning 10 points. And then they were
Yeah.
pissed because they were like, well, that was only supposed to take 5 points. I didn't want to burn 10 points. Now you guys
Yeah.
just hosed me. You gave me this hunt. You gave me a 5 point hunt and you charged me 10. I lost 5 years of applying. And so
Yeah.
that's why that was the main reason behind it, of like these people didn't realize and didn't think it through going into it, of like, hey, whereas your idea of, hey, I'm going to commit 7 points if I can get it with this, cool,
Yeah.
like it's worth it to me. That
Yeah.
option would have been awesome. I absolutely
Yeah.
love that
Yeah.
idea. I
Because to
think it would have been
me,
great of like, hey, I will commit, but it was talked about of, and then taking an extra point too. So if a unit takes five and somebody with 20 puts in for it, we're going to actually take six, knowing you're going to lose one extra just to kind of make it a little bit more fair. But
yeah.
that still didn't address the, hey, like you're going to have 10 people with 20 points and putting in for this. So it's actually going to make it a 10-point draw.
Yeah.
And
I think
just people
that's
not understanding that that was a possibility in the first couple of years until it kind of shakes out. And then they also talked about how it was going to take a 5 point unit that people were banking on and make it a 10 point unit for a couple of years.
right.
It would have averaged out. It would have
Yeah.
been just a little bit of, like, the fact that they tried it for 1 year and said it didn't work, I don't think is fair.
Yeah. Well,
Getting into the point averaging, they were scared of the boogeyman. The same thing that they're
yeah.
scared, the same boogeyman that they're scared of with the return tag list, of that there's a computer program out there doing it for you,
Yeah.
which it's completely unrealistic in my mind. But it was the same thing with the averaging, of like, where you're going to have people putting in for their wife and then they're going to draw the average tag and then they're going to draw and then one of them's going to turn the tag back in and keep their points and they're going to do it the next year. And it's like,
What?
okay, let's just build a system that doesn't allow that. It's pretty simple.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So there's a lot there for me to unpack, Lane. So it sounds like one, from my perspective, is really they failed on the execution of it, right? Like, dude, to me, I find this really weird that, and it's not just the CPW, a lot of other fish and game state organizations, they want to do this. They want to like always impose these weird things. Like, for instance, just what you said, Lane. Okay, so if I put my daughter in, and it could be totally from a positive perspective. I want her to be a hunter. She's 12 years old. I'm putting in for her points, right? I'm putting money into the system. Now, if you're not if you're not charging and stuff for kids, yeah, you'd have to be wary of this. But I'm putting money in the system so she can have an opportunity to hunt. Now, if like 7 years from now she just doesn't like hunting, but my son does, and we take her points and group them with my points and my son, and we go hunting, like why is that a bad thing? Like we all paid into the system. I feel like there's always these institutions, they want to make like a judgment call on like what I think is just be like, hey, people invested in it. Why not just let them utilize what they've invested in? I find it very weird, and the point banking thing's the same way. It's like, well, why don't you just do like a free market deal? Like I'm gonna just post up how many points I'm willing to use on the hunt. I think it's odd that they do that, and they're so afraid of there being a transfer of money or like a like kind transfer of money that they're not involved in. It's like a fucking obsession they have, right? Like, oh, if we do groups, then Lane's gonna have 5 points, and then Cliff's got zero, but he knows the hunt, and then Lane and Cliff are gonna go hunting, and Cliff's really guiding Lane, but and it's like, who
What's wrong
fucking
with that?
cares?
What's
Yeah,
wrong with
who
that?
cares?
We're
Yeah,
both hunting,
exactly. Like
right?
who cares? You know what I mean? It's an interesting dynamic. I don't know why it's a subject matter in these things. Do you have
I
thoughts
I
on it?
I couldn't agree with you anymore on that. I don't see what the problem. If I have 10 points in Wyoming and my buddy has 20, and we
Right.
apply for a unit that takes 15, and then I know a little bit more about hunting because I've been hunting for those 10 years where he's just been banking points for 20. What's wrong with that? Well, I'm giving that
Ah,
person that doesn't have the knowledge base as much a more enjoyable hunt, and I'm having an enjoyable hunt. What's wrong with that? As
yeah,
long as he's not paying me, as long as he's not paying me to guide him, which would be illegal
right.
anywhere else, right?
Sure.
So you're talking that like they're almost accusing us of being criminals, if you want to put it that way.
Yeah, like
Of like
before.
if
Yeah.
your example of the I have five, you have zero, and then well you're going to come with me and you're going to be guiding me, and then I kick you $500 for doing it. That's illegal because I'm paying
Sure.
you to guide me. So now
Right.
you're accusing me of being a criminal on top of everything else.
Yeah, it's such yeah, it's a weird thing that they do, and I think unfortunately, Lane, the result is like a sub fair system. You know what I mean? Um, yeah, it doesn't matter because we're like into hypotheticals, but I just think it's really interesting how most of the like I could have told you that probably point banking was completely shunned for those other reasons, right? Like people, and then the group thing too. So yeah, I don't know. It's really odd.
I would have loved to see both those come through.
Yeah.
If there's a way to burn points, point banking is the way to do it. If they really wanted to see people burn their points, point banking was the way to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. And dude, I know the technology is really like tuned in and smooth because I actually, when I was in graduate school, Lane, I went to University of Chicago, and University of Chicago is like where Friedman went to, like it was a big deal. And so they're like free market, like to like the end, right? So even when you put in for classes, you bid points. Like you have a certain amount of point. Like you start like we I don't remember what the number is, but you start with like 100 points in the bank, right? And then all the classes are on your computer. And dude, this was like freaking 15, 20 years ago. So the technology is better now. But when you went up to sign up for classes, you would just bid however many points like you wanted for that class. Because there'd be like a famous professor everybody wanted, and then there'd be like the younger professor or whatever. Dude, and it worked flawlessly because if you got the subpar professor, you had like a bunch of points that you could use the next quarter, and then you could get like go to the Nobel Prize guys lecture or whatever the fuck you wanted to do. So it worked freaking perfectly, man. And so I know it can be done, you know.
Oh
But
yeah, it
anyway,
definitely could be done. I'm with you on it. I would have loved to see it happen. It's just we need a well, we at least have until 2032 before it happens.
yeah, yeah, sure, yeah, yeah. No,
So,
it is what it is. But I would love to see fish and game. I think it's the most fair system, so that's why I get excited about it, man. But
yep.
Lane, what do you think is going to happen between now and 2028? like, do you, I mean, if you don't mind sharing it, dude, like, what's your personal, like, strategy as a resident? And then do you have any thoughts if you were a non-resident, like what, how you would kind of play the game?
I think for the most part, the changes are there. I think the only thing that has a chance of getting tweaked and changed later on is, and I'll get into it right now. Then the next change was the 75-25 applies to the first round of the draw and the second round of the draw. Before it only applied to the first round of the draw. After that, it was fair game, and it usually shook out to about a 50-50 split of who was getting tags and who wasn't. Well, now that 75-25 split is going to apply to the first round of the draw and the second round of the draw. So it's going to
Okay.
give residents a little bit more preference in getting their tags in the second round of the draw.
Okay.
What was proposed was that 75-25 was going to apply to the first round, the second round, the third, and the fourth.
Okay.
And with that being called the soft cap. So if on the second choice, if only 30% of the people applying were residents, well, the residents would get it, and then the other 70 would go to the non-residents. So it was a soft cap. It wasn't a hard cap.
Okay.
It was so the same thing with the third. If only 30% of the people putting in were residents, cool, the residents got it, and then the non-residents got the other 70%. So it wasn't a hard cap. Parks and Wildlife came forward and said, hey, just so you know, this could cost us, worst case scenario, $4.2 million. But they said there's no way it's going to be anywhere close to that 4.2 million, but that's the only realistic number we can come up with because we haven't gone through and figured out who went through in the draw, and it would have taken a lot of time and effort and money to just have a good projection on it. So they just came forward and said, worst case scenario, this is going to cost $4.2 million.
Okay. Sure.
Commissioner Haskett made a very good point of like, well, yeah, you haven't even saw that we're now requiring all non-residents that apply for archery to be buying a qualifying license. So that's going to boost revenue. We're getting $60,000 somewhere else from gaining from this, from losing. I think that's what it was. We're going to gain $60,000 with that losing that 80-20 split to the 75-25. And she goes, and it's very unrealistic that residents are going to be the only ones drawing in that 75-25. The
Right.
realistic, in my opinion, we would have maybe lost $1 million worst case scenario. But there
Yeah.
was no way to quantify it. So the worst case scenario is 4.2 million. They were getting ready to vote on the 75-25 applying to all four rounds of the draw. And I believe it was Davis said, I just want to remind everybody, you're voting on cutting $4.2 million out of the budget.
Right.
And Maria goes, we just talked about how that's not what it's going to be.
Yeah.
And she goes, if that's really going to affect your vote that much, let's just have it apply to the first two rounds of the draw. And so
Oh,
that's
okay.
why it got changed from all four choices to the first two choices.
Okay.
So, and I'm okay with that. It's a give and take. It's not what we wanted. It's not what was going on. It's not what we were promised when we lost the 80-20. The whole thing with the 80-20 of losing those 5% was, we're going to make up for it by giving you this. That was going to be the compromise that was talked about in the big game draw working group. Yeah, you're losing out on 5% here, but you're gaining it in the second, third, and fourth choices. That was
Yeah.
the compromise. Well, then they took it away. They changed it. I won't say they took it away. They changed it.
Yeah.
Okay, I can still live with it.
Sure.
So then a commissioner that I believe is newer goes, well, we got to make up for this loss. Let's start charging for points. And the staff goes, ooh, we just happened to put that at the very bottom of the thing. We know that the draw working group said we don't want it and that charging for points is not something that we should be doing right now. And staff recommendation on the last meeting was absolutely hard no, don't charge for points.
And you're talking
But we just,
about sorry, Lane. So and dude, I'm just trying to
you're good.
keep track of all the facts.
Yep.
Have both residents and non-residents, they haven't had to pay for points, or is it
Nope.
just okay, so
No, all we're
both.
paying right now when we apply is a processing fee.
Okay, gotcha. So we're gonna for sure get into that one because I know
Yeah.
that that's an important one for you. But let's unpack some of the stuff that you just said, so like, and get it to where I guess it's more like actionable for people. So the first and second choice deal, and just so everybody who's listening knows, in general, Lane, your most of your viewpoint, I would say, is like an advocate for the resident, right? So when you say they gave us this, that's kind of what you're saying. You're
What I'm
saying
saying,
like,
yes,
yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
Yep.
So just so everybody who's listening understands that. Now, to me, this first and second choice deal, particularly when you add in the fact that that the non-resident archery tags are going draw, it's a really relevant thing for non-residents to think about, like, what is this really going to look like in terms of like, well, I guess there's a lot of guys that I know who have been building points as non-residents while they're hunting, while they're continuing to hunt in Colorado, right? And I know in a lot of discussions with those guys, a lot of them are assuming that they're going to be able to continue to do that, right? They're going to be able to put preference points as their first choice, and then draw the unit that used to be over the counter, or 0 points or whatever, as a second choice. And maybe they could still do that, but this could affect that a little bit. Am I right?
Absolutely. I think there's a strategy and a very quick, easy fix to it. To address one of the other change that's going to go into these guys and women in particular is that there's no longer a preference point option for your first choice of the draw. When you log in now, you're going to say, do I want to buy a point or do I want to apply for the draw? Which
Oh,
really
dude,
is going to change.
yeah, explain that to me, because this is gigantic. Okay.
Yeah, that's huge. You're no longer first choice. Preference point is not there. It's
Okay.
you're either applying to draw and burn your points, or you're just going to buy a point and you're sitting out on everything else. And that's
Oh,
actually something that I like because there's
yeah,
people out there with 35 points. There's not a hunt in Colorado that takes 35 points. They
yeah,
just get on and buy points every year. And
yep.
then they'll put a second choice and they'll do that. Cool. That's not an option anymore.
Yeah, so there's
So
no more being a part of the draw and continuing to hunt if you don't draw, like,
yeah, it's
okay.
like, hey,
Yeah,
do you want to hunt this year or do you not want to hunt this year?
yeah,
It's kind of that's the thing that's there.
yeah,
So
that'll have drastic changes.
I
That'll
think it's
have
going to help. I actually think that's going to help a lot because they're like those people that have 35 points that are like, oh, I'm just building points for what? You should have been hunting 10 years ago.
Oh, yeah, yeah, just from an individual perspective.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, and then also, and dude, I was totally, when I was a resident, I did this. Like, you have a lot of double dippers, right? Like, they're hunting all the time, but they're also accumulating points. That's
And I
gonna be
still
a
think there's going to be an option for that for the non resident here, especially if you're coming to archery and we're talking how that went all draw.
yeah,
Well, all those tags aren't going to go to first choices because of people like that, which I totally get.
yeah,
If they put in for a hunt now on their first choice, that's harder to get. They
yeah,
don't draw it. They're going to build their point. The second choice, if they put in those OTC hunts, they're only competing against other non residents. They're not competing against residents on that. So that's a
okay.
100% pool for non residents. The chances of them drawing that are probably 100%.
Oh, oh, I see what you're saying, because
Does that
there's
make
just,
sense? That's a
yeah,
great
yeah,
strategy for the non-resident
okay.
there of I'm still going to be able to come and hunt in Colorado every year and build points.
Yeah, I see,
And
I see.
if you
So,
get lucky and you draw that 10-point hunt you're putting in for, cool, even better.
yeah, yeah, but okay, but you pointed out something I was wrong about there, Lane. So, if in the archery context, the fact that the split on the second choice is now tilted more towards residents, doesn't actually affect, because when we're talking about the uh, these easy to draw archery hunts that used to be over the counter, the non-resident is not competing with the resident, because the resident can still
Correct.
buy them over the counter. Oh, okay.
Correct.
Oh, okay. I guess they're like tangentially competing with them, but this doesn't affect it, because now residents are going to have a little bit of a preference, obviously, to get those tags.
Correct.
Yeah, I'm trying to handicap that for people, Lane, because this is probably the most common question. All these non-resident guys who have been hunting over the counter, or they've been hunting 0 point units, they're all concerned about, like, well, can I still hunt? Can I still continue to hunt or not? Can I still, basically everybody uses as a back, Colorado is like a backup, like I'm going elk hunting. So, like, can they continue to do that? And I actually really don't know the answer. I
Edit out my advice I just gave then.
yeah,
If you want them burn points. But it's like Wyoming. I have 12 points Wyoming. I haven't hunted elk in Wyoming for 12 years because I'm building points. I don't
yeah,
have that option to do both. I don't have the option in Utah to do both,
right.
or in Arizona or New Mexico. I don't get that option, but Colorado has always gave that option. And I agree there's got to be a balance. I like having that state of like I can tell my non-resident buddies, "Oh, you want to hunt elk? Come to Colorado with me. Let's go."
No, I think
So
it's a good I think it's a
I
good
think it's
thing
great.
too, but
But at the
it's
same time, the only way that that's really going to be dampered, and I don't know how much they're going to cut back on the non-resident tag allocation that were used to be OTC and is
mhm.
now draw for the non-residents. They haven't come out and said what that cutback is going to be.
Yeah, no, nobody says like, dude. I mean, the thing is, Lane is like, that's what I hear from everybody, and it's like, dude, they could, it could be basically the exact same system because they
It's going
like,
to be.
yeah, that's what I would speculate because they could literally allocate more tags in some units than had been being used in the over the counter. So it's like it probably is not going to change that much. But like are there going to be specific units that it does change in? Like, totally could. I don't know.
I think that the way that they're going to do it is the way that they do other ones. Of the first 2 years, they're just going to give out so many tags, and they're going to see how many are sold,
Yeah.
and then that's going to be their base, and they're going to make sure it doesn't go above that anymore, if that
Yeah.
makes sense. So if unit,
Yeah.
I don't want to give out a unit I hunt. I'll just throw out unit 25, which isn't even part of this anyway. Unit
Mhm.
25 takes like that last this year. This is the first year they're doing it, and 1,000 non-residents buy that tag, and next
Yeah.
year 900 non-residents buy that tag. Well, then they're going to probably set that cap somewhere in the 900s so that more people don't flood it later on, but it's going to stay about there. And then they're going to
Yeah.
at least have a baseline of who is wanting to hunt that every year, and then go from there and see how the crowding is and see if they have to tamper down or not. I think that to
Yeah.
get that worked out is going to take 5 more years before it's actually really good. I would like
Yeah.
it if they just cut it 10% across the board because that was part of the proposal. I don't think it's going to happen this year.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, and you bring a good point that I've always thought about. There's like a couple things in there. Like, dude, one thing I noticed, like, there's a lot of first rifle tags. It's kind of an analogous situation that are really, like pseudo over the counter tags in Colorado.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Because there's freaking thousand leftover bull tags or whatever. So there's a part of me that's like, oh, some of this stuff's going to look like that in 10 years because they just aren't going to want to give up that revenue because it happens to be in areas that are like real remote and you can hunt the shit out of the elk, but they still survive. They like they make it through. So you kind of see that element, like they're little revenue generators. But anyways, that's kind of on the side. It's kind of interesting how it all falls out. But I think you're right, dude. It makes sense because they got to have a benchmark. And I don't care what anybody says. They really don't know how many people have been hunting these units. Like the actual
Truly.
breakdown, like they just don't know. Um, and so they have to figure that out. I mean, one, I guess silver lining of all of this is, I mean, there's a lot of positives, but one's, additional positive is that they're going to know how many people hunted specific
I
units.
think it's going to be a huge positive, and it's also going to start making people to burn some of their points in different areas. So hopefully, at some point, it does make the points come down. The best argument that I've heard to people of getting rid of all OTC tags altogether and making it full draw is that you don't have the point creep that you have because of the OTC tags and people building points and then continuing to hunt. I don't want to
Sure.
see that happen, but when it eventually does, because I feel like it's going there at some point, and the commission has told us that that's their goal. The nice thing about that is you're not going to have a 28-point hunt anymore. That's probably going to be more realistically of a 20-point hunt.
Yeah. Because
Just look at
basically,
deer. Look at our deer. That's the
yeah.
perfect example. People
Yeah.
love
Yeah.
hunting big mule deer. Colorado has the best big mule deer, arguably. I know I don't want to hurt
No,
anybody
no,
other
no, no,
states' feelings,
yeah, they
um,
do.
but like our one of our hardest tags to draw, 44 fourth rifle. Like that's not a secret. I'm not giving out anything.
Yeah,
Like
sure.
what's that, an 18-point draw for a resident?
Yeah, I
And
think
then
yeah, yeah,
and
for
then
resident.
and then 201 art rifle is what, 29, 28.
Yeah.
So I mean, you're talking about 10 extra points because those people are hunting elk every year.
Yeah, they're double dipping
They're
where it's
double dipping.
harder. Yeah, it's harder on deer. So yeah, So I guess what you're saying, Lane, is like probably or whatever. It could be 5, could be 10 years from now. That in Colorado, you're either going to hunt elk in low point units, every couple years, or you're going to be somebody just like the other states where you put in for years and then go on a hunt. It's kind of
I the commission has said that the next 5 year
that's the
big
goal.
game season structure, that is the goal.
I gotcha.
So
Yeah, yeah,
unless
yeah,
there's this huge big impact, which I don't think is going to be able to happen, I've already explained with it of the change and stuff. I think that's going to end up happening on this next go around.
yeah, yeah, man. I wonder. And again, it's like nitpicking at people who have a very hard job. So I realize that's the case, but I does data come up in any of these discussion
Oh,
much? Like
yeah,
it
big
does,
time.
yeah,
There's a lot of data. Matt Eckert, Brian Dreher are two people at Colorado Parks and Wildlife that, I mean, you want to talk about people that live off from data, like,
sure.
and they were able, their staff did a very good job of bringing it into the big game draw
Break,
working group. And like, even with this 50-50 split, man, you should have seen the presentations that were put up
yeah, yeah.
and showing, like, I talked about how I was listening to going to work and stuff there. I literally pulled over and got gas one time to sit down and just watch for
Figure out
20
what.
minutes
Yeah,
of
yeah.
what they were showing and presenting and stuff because it was really cool, and like the time and effort and the thought and that went into it
Sure.
was really well.
Well,
So yeah, a
dude,
lot of data.
and some of this stuff is actually really complex math because it's like you're dealing with probabilities and there's not like a certain because there's like different things like this is going to shift to this and some of the people who did this like that those hunts are going to cannibalize these other hunts like there's really complicated crap going on. And so that's nice to hear, man. I wish that Colorado would move to like mandatory reporting and that sort of thing too, just so the guys had better data.
You and me both. Their argument is that they've ran the models and that they get about the exact same results as the mandatory, which I still will argue with all day
Yeah.
long. That the
Total it's yeah.
that it
It's
doesn't.
bullshit.
Although I will give them this: if your name gets drawn for that report, you can't just ignore it because they will hound you on the
Yeah. They
phones
keep calling you.
day and night. They've called me so much because there's been times like, "Hey, I'm busy right now. Call
Yeah.
me later." Man, they
Yeah.
will call you later. I've done those things at 9 o'clock at night before.
Yeah.
So yeah, they do
Yeah,
hound you
it's
if you get drawn. But I agree. I wish the mandatory reporting was there. It's there for Alaska. It's there for New Mexico. I just got one from Arizona that was optional, and I'm one of the persons that tries to give as much data as I can. So I always try to do it, but I
sure.
know not everybody is like that. And the mandatory just it makes sure you're getting the data.
Yeah, and like Oregon, does it just on the app on your phone. Like it's mandatory, it's easy for them to collect it. I don't think it's that hard to do it. And dude, it's for sure anecdotal, Lane, but some of the units I used to guide in, their harvest data was total dog shit. Like
Oh,
total crap,
well,
dude.
I'll tell you one
Um,
way to do it, and you don't even have to make it mandatory anymore, is switch to the system that Montana has where it's an online tag system.
yeah,
Because then to punch your tag, you're doing it on the app as soon as you get cell phone service, it uploads. And
sure.
then I didn't have to fill out anything telling them that I shot a buck this year. They knew it automatically as soon as I got cell phone service.
Oh, okay, yeah, yeah.
So
Yep,
I
yep,
think that that's a point that probably I hope goes away at some point because I don't know how many times you've traveled to an area and forgot your tag.
yeah, oh yeah, sure.
But if it's on your phone, I'm not forgetting my phone. It's right here, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So if I could just have it on that and do it on there, I love that new system. I'm somebody that usually fights that kind of change. I like having a piece of paper in my pocket to
sure.
lose, apparently. But doing that this year, New Mexico, I mean, in Montana, completely changed my viewpoint of it. I'm doing it for all my out of state tags now. Any
Yeah.
Arizona offers it, New Mexico, they're all in the future is going to be online
Yeah,
tag systems.
just e-tagging kind of stuff that
Yep.
makes sense. But, Lane, let's talk about the one that's got you fired up, the economics on the points.
So yeah, so they said, "Hey, we just voted to lose 4.2 million," which everybody knew it wasn't actually 4.2 million dollars. And the staff was like, "Ooh, we actually included this little graph for you to show that if you voted for a slight preference point fee to start applying to these tags, then how much money we could make up." And so they voted for, and they showed the little graph. And so then they went through and they voted, and it passed by one vote, I believe. So it was close, and there was a lot of debate around it. but they did it with no public input whatsoever. In the very last meeting, they said this isn't even an option. We're not even going to do this. Nobody wants it. The draw working group doesn't want it. The staff didn't recommend it. But then went ahead and it got proposed anyway by one of the commissioners that was not on the big game draw working group. Just looking at dollar signs, in my opinion. And they said, and they threw it as a compromise because we just did this other thing that we had already compromised on
Yeah.
for the 75-25, and they started charging for deer, elk, pronghorn, turkey, which I think is insane. Black bear now is going to be charging you a resident $15 per point and a non-resident $30 per point. So you just took my application fees, my resident application fees. I have to buy a big game combination license. I have to buy a small game combination license, which is $60. If you really want to go really, really cheap, I can buy a $35 hunting license, small game license. But who's going to do that? I fish too. So $60. I already buy $150 worth of points for moose, bighorn sheep, and mountain goat. And then all my $8 fees to apply. And now that it's going to cost me $326 in non-refundable fees as a resident to apply to hunt big game in Colorado. Just
Right.
like that. You just took a $60 tag for elk and you added 15 more dollars. You put a 32% increase on that tag.
Yeah.
Just with the snap of a finger. And that's what I don't agree with. And the thing that really bugs me about all of it is that they say if 90% of the people continue to apply and build preference points, which that's a very realistic number, that's going to increase revenue by $9 million.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
worst case, so what they just did is worst case scenario, $4.2 million. Let's make up for that with a $9 million.
Right.
It's like, that doesn't even make sense. How come we didn't just apply this to elk and then that would have at least offset it? How come it's applying to everything? In my opinion, it was a money grab. And the worst, it's like going and buying a $1 million house. Cause I think the 75-25 thing is only going to cost $1 million. That's
Mm-hmm.
just a strict guess, but that's why it's like going and buying a $1 million house, but taking a $9 million loan out for it. And then telling the bank, don't worry what I do with the other 8 million. It's going to be in good hands.
Right. Well, the other thing is, dude, it's back to the core goal of or one of the core goals of all these changes. So you increased the cost for residents by what is like $50, right? But
75 if you apply for everything.
okay, 75, and then for non-residents it's like a couple $100. Is that right?
150.
$150. So yeah, so you know the numbers. So it's 150. So now we're imposing a fee for people to enter the preference point system. But one of the main goals of this whole working group was to encourage people to enter the preference point system by making it where people had a better chance. It's kind of counterintuitive to me. It's like, well, now you got people like they got another thing they got to pay to be a part of the system. So, yeah.
I was so fired up the next day talking to a buddy. I said, at some point it's going to say, when are they going to just come out and say I'm not allowed to hunt the king's deer?
Yeah.
Unless I make $1 million a year, you're not even going to be allowed in here like it used to be. And that's what it's coming into, is like a $326 for me. And then it's going to be $326 for my wife. And then I'm applying for my kids as well. Next year, my son is going to be 12 and able to hunt. Like that's a lot of money. I'm a fireman, man. I don't make a couple $100,000 a year to be able to afford this. In fact, I work a side job just so that I can pay for my hunting addiction anyway.
Yeah.
Like, what about the person that's making the median income here in Colorado? Like, what about the
Sure.
people down in the San Luis Valley where the median income is $35,000 a year? They can't afford that. You're just telling them they
Right.
can't hunt anymore. You're telling them it sucks to be you. And I will say, Commissioner Haskett, Murphy Robinson, the other commissioner, did a very good job of talking about how, like, you are going to be pricing people out of hunting with this. They were adamantly against it. I can't thank them enough for it. Of
Yeah.
just pointing out, like, this is very inequitable here.
Yeah. And it's
This whole
like,
thing was fair and equitable, right? But let's just make it a rich person's sport, which I don't want to see.
yeah. And the thing is, you want for me personally, man, like, You could get in this really long, drawn out argument. It would be hard for me to have the argument because I don't know how bad they need the money and how much the additional money is going to improve their marginal ability to manage the wildlife, right? We can have this long debate about that. I just don't know. So we can talk about it, Lane. I just don't know, right? So it's hard for me to have a judgment on it. I'll make this one point and then we can dive into that. The only thing is, like, any time, dude, that I feel like there's a hindrance at the lower level, particularly for, like, kids or whatever, to gain points or start hunting, I'd view it as a negative. And what you just said, man, I think is the big one for non-residents in and resident. It's like, damn, dude, now if I've got 4 kids and I want them to be involved, and, like, let's say I live in a neighboring state. I live in Nebraska or something. I'm like, I wanna go to the mountains with my kids, and my kid's 12 years old. I don't know if they're going to be a big hunter or not. I've got 3 kids. Now I got to fork out like $500 every year just for like that potential of them being able to do some cool hunts in the future. I'm always negative on that kind of thing. But go ahead, man.
So the thing that gives me hope here, sorry, I moved that. Do I sound better now? The
No,
thing
you're
that
good.
gives me hope here is that I was told by one of the commissioners if there's something that's going to change, this is going to be it. And they are going to look, and this is before this even came up, there's looking at other revenue sources for parks and wildlife. Because if you're looking at this report that's dated um, covering July 1st, 2022 to June 30th, 2023, revenues exceeded expenses by 53 million across all funds. That's an excess of 53 million. The
Yeah.
problem is this excess is coming in on the park side and not the wildlife side. And so they're looking at ways of changing, and this is going to have to come in on a different side. And I believe it's legislative to like change the way to use some of these funds. Like parks money is supposed to stay on park side, and wildlife is supposed to stay on wildlife side. But
Okay.
there's a lot of gray areas as to where it mixes, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
And
sure.
because of those, a lot of those gray areas are what are creating parks now has this surplus. Wildlife doesn't have it because they're spending so much money on, say, enforcement and everything like that. And so they're trying to find a way to kind of get that, be able to bridge that gap to where if parks has a little bit of excess, wildlife side can take it, if that
Yeah.
makes sense. And they're also looking at other potential incomes for revenue. I think it was brought up in this meeting that Colorado Lottery is talking about giving more money to Colorado Parks and Wildlife and making sure that some of that money is ear notched specifically for the wildlife side and not just the park side as well.
Right. I got
So
you.
there's a potential, and there's hopefully when that money comes through, we're talking about in the next 3 years. Before these changes come in, the first thing that some of these commissioners want to do is go back and vote on this and say, hey, we're going to be getting potentially $10 million from this over here. Let's get rid of this thing that we voted on over here so that we can be helping out everybody, because it's not only hurting the non-residents and it's hurting the residents as well, and it's going to be making it a lot more expensive for people to apply. Let's make sure we're keeping it at a fair price point for people to apply.
Yeah, sure. No, I think that's good to know that at least it's kind of like it's like the one that's closest to the chopping block. So
Yeah, I think you saw my little rant on Instagram. I was off a little bit on the numbers. I was close to. I thought it was 40% on the one. It was the total of how much it's been over the past few years. I said it in 1 year. I was wrong. I have no problem admitting I was wrong when it comes to numbers on that. But if you look at like their fiscal revenue, when they changed the draw in 2019, I already brought up how much extra money they brought in. And I
right.
was told when I was a part of a working group looking at tag allocations and stuff, and this is a couple years ago, we have extra money now. We have to do this now and strike while the iron is hot. And then by the time we got to drop the hammer, they'd already found a way to spend that money. We can't
Yeah.
afford this anymore. And I
Well,
think
that's
that's what
like
the
that's
resident hunter is the most sick of hearing of, oh, we can't do it because it's going to cost money. It's like, well, we had it 2 years ago. You guys found dumb shit to spend it on.
yeah, which is like a structural issue with any kind of government entity, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, anytime you like, they're never gonna run like a surplus for a decade or something. You
Well, the
just
problem is they can't run a surplus. My understanding of their budget is the same way that my fire department's budget is. If you don't spend it, you lose it.
Oh, it
It
goes
goes
into
to the
the
it goes to the general fund.
yeah, I gotcha.
So it's a jacked up way that our government works. If you really want to get into it, they use it or lose it. The fact that my fire department isn't allowed to say, "Hey, we're holding this $1 million back so that next year we can do this $2 million project," is insane. And it's
Yeah,
the same thing with them. If they don't lose it, then if they don't use it, they're going to lose it, and they can't carry it over to the next year, which I
yeah.
think is absurd. It should not go into the general fund. It should stay specifically for them. And I could be wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure that's how their budget works as well.
Yeah, I gotcha. Yeah, so it's a tricky situation.
Yeah.
Oh, good stuff, dude. What any other ones, Lane, or we
Oh
kind
yeah,
of
there's all kinds. There's some other
oh,
ones
okay.
coming out. So we talked about the preference points. That was the really big one.
Mhm.
Bighorn sheep, mountain goat, and moose. They're getting rid of what they call the weighted point system.
Sure.
It's not going to affect your draw odds at all.
Yeah, I that's
If you have
sure.
20 points right now, it's like you have 20 points right now, but it's going to be the same thing. Your name goes in the hat 21 times versus the way that they used to do the really complicated. I actually like this change because the way they did it before, man, I've studied Colorado system for so long. For me to explain the squared blah blah blah
Yeah.
thing to you is so hard and convoluted. I actually like this change. It's going to be good. It still favors the high point holder. In fact, I know their numbers say it doesn't change your draw odds at all. I think it's actually going to favor the high point holder a little bit more. The only thing I would have liked to see is if they had held 30% of the tags to the high point holders and the other 70 goes into that random. That way you're rewarding the high point holder a little bit more, but beggars can't be choosers here. Um,
Sure.
they're going to make it once in a lifetime harvest on any antlered moose, which was already there. Bighorn sheep ram or mountain goat on an either sex license will not be eligible to draw another male or either sex license for that species in the future. The exception is going to be if you get lucky and you get like a governor's tag somehow in a raffle, and then for guys like me that have already killed a mountain goat and a bighorn sheep, it's not retroactive. I can still apply. I can still draw. It's once in a lifetime from 2028 going forward. So
Okay.
even if you get lucky this year and you draw your sheep tag here in Colorado, then you will still be eligible after that 5 year waiting period to build points and do it again. That's really crazy about this one is that the Bighorn Sheep Society showed up in November and was adamantly against it because they said you're going to be losing out on revenue by cutting people out on this because you're going to be losing out on that $50 point or that $100 point from non-residents, and it's going to take away from the animals. So because honestly, it's not going to affect draw odds like at all to
Yeah,
take a
it's not that
couple
many
people out.
people. Yeah, yeah, sure.
So, obtaining points is going to be the same thing. And then the reissued tag is the last thing that's really going to kind of change things. Right now, if I draw a tag, I turn it back in after the secondary draw, then it just goes to the leftover list. They're going to start automatically reissuing those tags to the next person in line, and that's going to continue up until 2 weeks before the season starts. What was
Yeah,
never brought up, and I don't think was worked out yet, is that I'm not allowed to return a tag less than 30 days before the season starts and get my
right.
points back. And so if I automatically get reissued this tag because I forgot to get on and take my name off that list, like they're going to have some really mad people at some point.
Yeah.
I think that should stop at 45 days. That's giving you enough time to find out, oh, I drew the tag. I need to turn it back in because I can't make it happen because I've already made a lot of other plans for this year.
Yeah.
I think the
Or
45
or
day is the most fair.
yeah, or they just give you when they do reissue it to you 2 weeks before, they give you the chance to get a
Yeah.
refund and your points back. Because
Yeah.
yeah,
They're going to have
they
to figure
gotta
something out on that.
yeah, they gotta fix it because you can't it's not even the money for most people, it's more like, "Oh, like, all my points are gone because you reissued a tag that I gotta hunt 2 weeks from now."
Yeah,
It's
and
not
if
gonna
that's a
work.
non-resident, man, good luck.
Yeah,
But they're going to leave the right now. I guess there was an issue with the failure to pays. If you failed to pay, then you'd lose your points, and
yeah,
you didn't get the tag, and you're going to get to retain your points on that, which is yeah, whatever. I know some people change credit cards, stuff happens. That doesn't affect it too much. And then the way that they actually do the leftover list, that's going to stay the same as to
okay.
how it is now. So there's just going to be a lot less tags on it now because of that automatic reissue.
Yeah. Yeah, and that kinda makes sense on the fail to pay, because that's kinda brutal.
Oh yeah.
I feel like I mean, who knows? I don't know the internal deal, but I feel like most people who I've heard, like, in that situation, it was a mistake. Like, it
Yes,
was,
or
it
your card gets hacked and you got to cancel your card, and then
yeah,
you totally forget there's so much stuff that goes in. If my credit card gets canceled, I've got so much automatic bill pay. The last thing
oh,
I'm
yeah.
thinking about is my tag applications.
Yeah, and I'm sure they send a couple warning emails or whatever, but it just seems like pretty brutal
Yeah,
to 1, they don't have the tag, but also to take their points just seems like kinda a little bit of like a ridiculous penalty or whatever, but yeah,
I
so
agree.
that's worked out. What, anything else, man?
No, dude, that's the for as far as the changes go, that's the changes on that. So
Yeah,
that kind of consumed my life a lot more than I thought. I thought last year after the OTC thing, my job at the Colorado Bow Hunters Association would be a little bit of a breath, and then it's like, oh man, this actually could affect stuff more than what the
yeah, yeah,
OTC thing did. So hopefully,
sure.
I can breathe a little bit after this with my job, and my updates don't take 20 minutes on our meetings and stuff.
Yeah, yeah, no, I hear you, and those are I mean,
So
they're big ones. I mean, these are not like minor shifts, man. You know what I
the,
mean?
yeah,
Go ahead.
the only thing I could say is like the commission, as much hate as they get for a lot of stuff, they're putting up with a lot. If anybody gets on and watches this meeting, they had a full day of wolf stuff the day before that's forced on this commission that they didn't necessarily ask for. The anti-hunters showed up to speak against the East Slope mountain lion management plan and just harassed them for like 2 hours with public comment
Yeah.
of you shouldn't kill cats, it's wrong, and you shouldn't use hounds, it's wrong. So they're dealing with a lot. So
Oh, yeah.
I do want people, if someone gets mad about this, give them some grace, man. They were exhausted at the end of that 2 day meeting as far as it. And so I do ask that they give a little bit of grace on some of this. And they put a lot of time and effort into this, especially that
Sure.
working group.
Yeah, well, and the other thing is you gotta, like, look at these type of subjects, rationally and realize that every individual has a different set of incentives based on how
Yep.
many points they have or whatever, so it's like it's they have an impossible job because 100% they're not gonna make people happy, you know what I mean? And so, it just is what it is, it's like a structural thing they gotta do their best on, so, no, I get that. Those I mean, they all dedicate a lot of time, to it, as you do too, so, no, I appreciate him for working on it, man. I would never. Yeah, years ago, I somebody asked me if I wanted to potentially be put up as the outfitter one. I was like, "Fuck no, no way,
Absolutely not.
nah, dude." I just and that's because just a function of the fact that I at least to some extent understand how much time they put into it and how much angst they go through. So,
I would hate to see just their email inbox before a meeting.
yeah, 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 oh, yeah, yeah, well, and plus they're the point of contact for negativity for a lot of people,
Oh
so
yeah, yep. They take the brunt of it over parks and wildlife staff and stuff. And I know staff takes some too, but the people that are educated as how stuff works are going to be aiming it right at them. So they sign up
yeah,
for a
yeah.
lot.
No, no, for sure. Dude, before I let you go, Lane, let's talk about Rucklist, man, and you know what
Yeah,
I didn't ask you about, before we started, is Eric still helping you at all with it,
yeah,
or is
yeah, yeah.
he's
He's
still
still there.
involved?
He's still working on the backside of stuff and the marketing
Okay,
stuff and
cool.
put. He was very helpful in us bringing together like stuff that I necessarily from a creative side am not good at as far as like the color scheme of like
Yeah,
beige
sure.
versus tan and like just
Right.
making everything like I think he put a lot of time on that side of like just bringing all this stuff together, right? So he's been a very good ace in the hole for us, and I think he's
Awesome.
put a ton of time and work into it. So yeah, still very much his baby with stuff
Yeah.
as well.
He,
But yeah,
he's a good dude. I did a podcast with him about, like, his hunt this last year, and it actually is a very popular podcast. I think it's got, like, 16,000 downloads or something on the podcast front, but, yeah, man, give the viewers and the listeners the elevator pitch on what it is, man.
I'm excited because we're getting to where it should be going to where people can actually sign up for it within the next month. And We've been told that from the developer side for the past year now. So I'm a little cautious on it. But at this point, with bringing Mick in and one of our developers, I'm really excited with where we're going to be at on it. And basically, it's kind of a solution of helping people pack for a hunt or knowing what to pack for a hunt and being able to kind of digitally pack and know exactly what you have in it. And then I think the biggest thing is for the new person coming into it, you're going to be able to have Cliff is going to be able to have his pack built out for a 7 day elk hunt, and somebody is going to be able to come and say, "Hey, this is Cliff's pack. I want to copy that pack." And they're going to be able to, so they know everything that you have, and if they know that if this is what you're taking into the backcountry, they can copy that pack and they can go into the backcountry and at least not starve or die unless they do something
Sure.
really dumb, right? So it's going to help everybody packing for like a big trip. Like I'm going on a coos deer hunt here in a couple of days. Me and my buddy are running through the group pack list right now, to where I went through and I said, "Hey, we need this." He's able to jump on and say, "I want this, this, and this." If that makes sense, I'm going to bring this, you bring this, and then it goes through and it says, "Hey, nobody's claimed this part. Who's bringing the Ranger? Who's bringing the coolers? Who's bringing this?" That's about the best elevator pitch for it. There's a lot of other
Yeah,
stuff
sure.
getting into it, but there's a lot of explore. We're going to do. We want to get into a lot of like real gear reviews. I feel like right now, and we talked about this offline. It's like there's a lot of people out there that are doing paid stuff. It's not
Sure.
really trustworthy, and we want to be the trustworthy version on that. Of like, hey, we're going to tell you exactly how we feel about this. Is there a company that I work with? If so, yeah, I'm probably not going to be the guy doing that gear review. It's
Yeah,
going to
I
be somebody else within the office doing it so that they know exactly what's going on with it. Rucklist.com, if anybody wants to go there, sign up right now. There's a thing right there that says, "Hey, keep me informed as soon as it goes live." It'll be there. But like I said, I mean, there's a potential that, let's say the 13th, within the next 2 weeks, it's already out.
cool.
Um, there's a potential. Like I said, developer stuff, it always changes. But the website is going to be live with other things too. We also spoke offline about how we kind of want to make it part of a platform for like Blood Origins and Howl and things that are going on that are affecting hunters and that are affecting the conservation efforts in areas, to where we want to be helping elevate those voices as well. And just as a way to direct people there, along with putting some of our stuff into it. I think Go Hunt has done a really good job. On X, we talked about getting involved with the wolf stuff. I think the mountain lion hunting ban being on the ballot here in Colorado did a really good job of showing these companies that are willing to put their money where their mouth is, and they're not scared of making some people mad just to do what's right for hunting and conservation. We want to be at the forefront of that as well. We want to make sure that when we take this, we can be doing what's best for everybody.
Cool, man. No, I think it's interesting, dude. I'm looking forward to checking it out. I mean, just as a tool. I mean, everybody who does this kind of hunting, man, they know that it's like you got 10 different spreadsheets and you're trying to keep track all your shit and your weight and groups and all of that. So I'm super interested, dude, in being a user of it. So look
Heck
forward
yeah,
to
I'm
it,
really
man.
excited to have you try it. For the outfitter side of things, I think it's going to be huge. I think that's who's going to benefit the most with this, of being able to build a pack out. Because right now, you know how it is when you're an outfitter and you got somebody coming that's never done it, and they're like, "Hey, bring this, and this." We got a lot of stuff that we are really focusing on for the outfitter side of things. Yeah, is it
Yeah,
going to help the DI? Excuse me, it's going to help the DIY person coming through. It's really going to help the outfitter, because it's going to be able to have them say, "Show up with this right here. This is your list. If you don't have it, you don't have to go search for it. Just click this link and buy it."
sure. Yeah, yeah. No, I got you.
So
Yeah, no, it'd be. I mean, it's crazy, Lane, because it was one of the things I disliked so much in the off season. That was updating my gear list and that sort of thing. Dude, if you look at outfitters right now, most outfitters, if you go look at their gear list, if they have them online, they'll be 6, 7, 10 years stale just because it's a giant pain in the ass. Like if you're,
huge
if
pain.
I mean, if you're doing like there was years that I was doing like 10 different types of hunts, like variations of hunts, right? Like elk, wall tent packing, lodge elk, elk backpack hunt. Like they all need different gear lists. And so it's a hassle, man, to administer all of them. and make sure the right people have them and everything else. So I think you'll find people that are very interested in using it for that, dude. So
I'm hoping
that's a
so.
good one.
We've put, I mean, it's been 3 years getting to this point, and for the last year, we've been told, "Oh, we're close with the developers
Yeah,
and stuff." And I'm not a developer. I mean, God bless those guys; they're putting so much time and effort into it. And Colin, our CEO, who's just ridiculous amount of time into it, to have like Brian's baby just come to life here.
sure.
But I'm excited for it. It's going to be fun. It's been an
Yeah,
adventure so far. So,
cool.
but the
Good deal,
cool
dude.
part is all of us are hunters. Everybody that's involved in it is a hardcore hunter. This weekend, my wife's cousin's wife shot a bull in this nasty hellhole. And I'd been helping him with the hunt the day before. That morning, I had stuff to do. And so I was like, I'm going to come in the afternoon and help you hunt. He texted me as I'm heading over there, "Hey, we just got a bull down in the worst possible spot." And so I text Brian and Colin with Rucklist. I was like, "Hey, we got a bull down in a hellhole. You guys want to come
Okay.
out, pack it out?" And they were like, "Absolutely." Brian was like, "Yeah, my kid's basketball game is ending right now." Colin was like, "My cousin's wrestling match is ending in 5 minutes." And within an hour, they were at the trailhead with me, and we hiked in, met up, like packed out this bull together. Like, so we're hoping that we can be like one of the real ones here in the hunting industry, and not a
Cool.
company that sees dollar signs out of hunters and here to exploit it, if that makes
Sure.
sense.
No, no, I hear you. Well, anytime you got something of value that people can use, dude, hunters are good clients, man. So awesome, Lane. Great to hear about it. Thanks for all your time, dude, and for also
Oh,
just
absolutely.
getting me up to speed on all this all this stuff. Where can people follow you personally, man?
R2 Lane, just letter R, number two, Lane on
Instagram.
Instagram. That's where most of my stuff is on there. I got a website, lanewalter.com, but my brother, I have him updated about every 3 years. So,
All good.
yeah. So R2 Lane on Instagram is about the best place for it. And then Rucklist. I'm sure there'll be a bunch of my stuff going up on there at some point. So
Sweet. All right, dude. Thanks a lot, man.
awesome. Thank you.
If you enjoyed this content, do me a huge favor. Subscribe on whatever platform you consume it on. Spotify, Apple, YouTube, whatever works for you guys. Everything else is on my website, pursuitwithcliff.com. Go there and it's going to be very apparent to you that I work my ass off just to not have a real job. All the hunts I guide, all the seminars I put on, all the unique experiences I offer, and the membership site, all the details are there.